Welcome, discerning souls, to a journey into the darkness. What I'm about to share is not just a story. It is a tapestry woven from horror, a chilling epic so unnerving that you may find yourself checking the locks a second time. This is more than a tale, it is a testament to the shadows lurking beneath the ordinary, a narrative built upon the very fears of humanity and the relentless pursuit of justice. Before we descend into the heart of Oakhaven's nightmare, before you steel yourself for the terrors that unfolded, I ask for a small but meaningful gesture. If you value a story crafted with care, one that respects your intelligence and delivers a profound experience, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing complex, immersive stories like this one to life. And now, with your engagement secured, let us begin. Turn off the lights, silence the world outside, and prepare to witness the horror of the Midnight Weaver. Oakhaven, Ohio, was a city carved from the gentle hills of the American Midwest, a place where autumn leaves burned vibrant orange and gold, and spring brought a verdant blush to its tree-lined streets. Its downtown, a charming blend of historic brick buildings and modern glass facades, hummed with the daily rhythm of small businesses and bustling cafes. Suburban neighborhoods fanned out from this heart, a mosaic of tidy lawns, picket fences, and the comforting predictability of community life. It was, by all accounts, a city of quiet contentment, where the biggest news often revolved around high school football victories or the annual summer festival. Its citizens slept soundly, tucked into their routines, believing their biggest threats were traffic jams and the occasional harsh winter storm. This serene illusion, however, was about to be shattered, meticulously, deliberately, thread by horrifying thread. The first disruption came not with a bang, but with an eerie, almost polite whisper of death. Eleanor Vance, 82 years old, lived alone in a charming, if slightly dated, Victorian home on Elmwood Avenue. Her days were a predictable cycle of morning tea, tending to her prize-winning rose garden, and engaging in lively phone calls with her sister in Florida. Her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a woman of equally firm routine, noticed the absence first. Eleanor's porch light, usually extinguished by 7 a.m., remained on well past 9. Her newspaper, normally snatched up the moment it landed, lay untouched on the dew-kissed welcome mat. A prickle of unease, sharp as a rose thorn, feathered up Mrs. Henderson's spine. By 11, after 3 unanswered phone calls, she called the police. Detective Sarah Jensen, a woman whose sharp intellect was often overshadowed by a weary pragmatism born of 7 years on the force, was the first on the scene. Her partner, Mark Ramirez, a stocky, affable man with a surprising keenness for detail, was right behind her. The house, when they entered with a reluctant patrol officer, was impeccably neat, almost sterile. No forced entry, no broken windows, no ransacked drawers. The air was cool, scented faintly with lavender and old books. Eleanor Vance was found in her armchair, facing the fireplace, a half-finished crossword puzzle resting on her lap. She looked utterly peaceful, as if she had simply drifted off to sleep. Yet, the pallor of her skin, the unnatural stillness, spoke of a finality far beyond a nap. "No signs of a struggle," Jensen murmured, her eyes scanning the room, taking in every minute detail. "Looks like she just passed." Ramirez knelt, a grim frown etched on his face. "Except for this, Sarah." He pointed to a small, almost imperceptible detail near Eleanor's right hand, resting on the armrest. It was a piece of fine, dark thread, intricately tied into a small, complex knot. It wasn't decorative, nor did it seem to have any functional purpose. It was simply there. A signature, perhaps. A chilling, silent calling card. The preliminary investigation was a whirlwind of forensic specialists, uniformed officers, and the hushed whispers of neighbors. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the medical examiner, confirmed the cause of death as asphyxiation. There were no marks on Eleanor's body, no struggle, no indications of the instrument used. It was, Dr. Reed explained, terrifyingly precise. The killer had been swift, silent, and expertly efficient. The knot, which initially seemed like an oddity, began to take on a more sinister meaning. It was an anomaly in an otherwise pristine crime scene. A deliberate act. News of Eleanor Vance's murder, initially contained within local reports as a tragic, isolated incident, started to ripple through Oakhaven. Fear, a cold, unwelcome guest, began to tap at the windows of people's homes. Was it a drifter? A mentally disturbed individual? The police assured the public they were pursuing all leads, but even Jensen and Ramirez felt a disquieting uncertainty. The lack of motive, the absence of any obvious connection, gnawed at them. Eleanor Vance was a sweet, harmless old woman. Who would want to harm her? And why in such a quiet, almost respectful manner? A week later, the tap at the window became a resounding knock. Marcus Thorne, 34, a successful architect living in a modern, minimalist home on the west side of Oakhaven, was found by his housekeeper. Like Eleanor Vance, there was no forced entry, no signs of a struggle. His home, a stark contrast to Eleanor's Victorian warmth, was equally immaculate. Marcus was found at his desk, head resting on his architectural blueprints, as if overcome by sleep. And there, on the corner of his polished mahogany desk, was another knot, identical to the first, tied with the same dark, silken thread, an intricate loop that spoke of deliberate, unhurried attention. Jensen felt a leaden weight settle in her stomach. "It's him again," she stated, her voice flat, the realization a bitter pill. The same method, the same signature. But why Marcus Thorne? What connects an elderly widow and a young architect? Ramirez ran a hand through his thinning hair. No obvious connection. No shared clubs, no mutual friends, no professional overlap. Marcus lived a very different life from Eleanor. The media, sensing a story far more insidious than a single, isolated incident, descended upon Oakhaven like vultures. Local news anchors, their faces grave, reported on the terrifying possibility of a serial killer. The term the Midnight Weaver, coined by a particularly imaginative reporter for the Oakhaven Gazette, referencing the silent method and the chilling knots, began to echo through the city streets. Parents held their children closer, doors were double-locked, and the usual evening strolls became hesitant, hurried dashes. A suffocating blanket of fear began to descend upon Oakhaven. Then came the third. Maria Rodriguez, a 28-year-old single mother working 2 jobs to support her 6-year-old daughter, was found in her modest apartment on the outskirts of town. Her daughter, Elena, mercifully, had been staying with her grandmother that night. Maria was found in her small living room, remote control still in her hand, the television silently flickering. Another knot. Same thread. Same meticulous precision. This time, the city didn't just ripple with fear. It convulsed with panic. The connection between the 3 victims was a phantom, an invisible thread only the killer seemed to grasp. An elderly woman, a successful professional, a struggling single mother. They spanned age, socioeconomic status, and race. It was random yet terrifyingly deliberate. The pressure on Jensen and Ramirez became immense. The chief of police, a portly man named Miller with a perpetually stressed expression, called them into his office daily, demanding answers they didn't have. "We've got a madman loose, detectives. The mayor's breathing down my neck. We need something, a motive, a witness, anything." But there was nothing. No eyewitnesses, no forced entry, no clear forensic trail beyond the ubiquitous knots. The killer was a ghost, leaving behind only the chilling evidence of their presence and the horrifying absence of life. The meticulousness of the crimes was baffling. It spoke of patience, planning, and an almost artistic control. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a cold, calculated performance. "He's playing a game," Jensen theorized during a late-night session, her eyes bloodshot. A half-empty coffee cup beside a sprawling map of Oakhaven dotted with red pins marking the murder sites. Each victim is a piece in a puzzle only he understands. And the knots, they're his signature, his way of saying, "I was here, and you can't catch me." Ramirez traced a line between the pins. The locations are spread out. Elmwood, then West Side, now the South End. No geographical pattern. No obvious travel routes. He's deliberately making it difficult. The lack of any tangible leads, coupled with the escalating terror, finally pushed the chief to make a difficult call. FBI assistance. Within 48 hours, a sleek, dark sedan pulled up outside the Oakhaven Police Department, and from it emerged Dr. Eris Thorne, a supervisory special agent and one of the Bureau's most respected criminal profilers. Thorne was a man who seemed carved from granite-sharp features, piercing blue eyes, and an aura of intense, almost academic detachment. He surveyed the bustling, chaotic police station with an unnerving calm. His initial meeting with the Oakhaven team was brief, clinical. He listened intently, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the weary detectives. "Tell me everything," he instructed, his voice low, measured. "Every detail, no matter how small, no matter how insignificant it may seem." Jensen, despite her skepticism of federal intervention, found herself drawn to his meticulous note-taking and the way his eyes seemed to absorb every word, every nuance. She laid out the timeline, the forensic reports, the lack of connections. She presented the photographs of the knots, magnified on the projector screen. Thorne studied them, a faint, almost imperceptible frown on his face. "These aren't random. This killer is highly organized, highly intelligent. The knots aren't just a signature. They're a statement, a message, and their very absence of utility suggests a deep psychological need for control and ritual." He paced the room, a predator analyzing its prey's movements. No forced entry suggests either a key or an entry through deception, or perhaps a pre-existing relationship where the victim trusts the killer. The lack of struggle points to extreme surprise or incapacitation, likely chemical, or a method so swift and silent that resistance was impossible. He's chosen victims who are vulnerable or who live alone or who are easily isolated. But the varied demographics, that's where the true puzzle lies. "Are you saying there's a connection we're missing, Dr. Thorne?" Jensen asked, her voice tinged with a blend of hope and exhaustion. Thorne paused, turning to face the map of Oakhaven, now a grim constellation of death. "I am saying there is always a connection. We simply haven't found the right lens through which to view it. This individual, this Midnight Weaver," he used the moniker with a hint of disdain, as if it oversimplified the darkness, "is not a chaotic monster. He is an artist, a meticulously destructive force. He is weaving a narrative, and his victims are simply the threads. And he's watching us. He's observing our reactions, our fear, our desperation. He's evolving." His words hung heavy in the air, a chilling premonition. Jensen looked at the map, then at the magnified image of the small, intricate knot on the screen. It wasn't just a knot. It was a tightly bound secret, a lock on a door the police couldn't find. Dr. Thorne's assessment was cold, analytical, but it resonated deeply within her. This wasn't just a series of murders. It was a deliberate, horrifying performance, designed to unravel the very fabric of Oakhaven. The killer was not just taking lives. He was taking the city's peace, its sense of safety. And as the dark silence of the precinct settled around them, Jensen knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this was only the beginning. The Midnight Weaver had only just begun to cast his shadow over their unsuspecting city. The shadow cast by the Midnight Weaver grew longer, darker, and more pervasive with each passing day. Oakhaven, once a bastion of idyllic suburban calm, transformed into a city under siege. The fear, initially a subtle tremor, now manifested as a constant, grinding anxiety that permeated every aspect of daily life. Streets that once bustled with evening joggers and families taking leisurely walks were now eerily empty after sundown. Restaurants and bars saw their patronage dwindle. Neighborhood watch groups, once a quaint symbol of community spirit, became grim, vigilant patrols, their members armed with flashlights and a palpable sense of dread. The mayor, his face gaunt from sleepless nights, instituted a voluntary curfew, a desperate plea for citizens to stay indoors, hoping to starve the monster of its opportunities. But the Weaver, it seemed, thrived on the very air of panic he created. The fourth victim was a stark, brutal reminder of his presence. David Chun, a respected history professor at Oak Haven University, was found in his study, surrounded by ancient texts and academic journals. His death mirrored the others. No forced entry, no struggle. The meticulous, not a chilling punctuation mark on his final moments. But this time, the weaver left something new. Tucked beneath the knot was a small, crudely drawn sketch on a piece of paper, depicting a tangled web with several figures trapped within its strands. It was a taunt, a macabre declaration of intent. He was not just killing, he was communicating, relishing the terror he sowed. Dr. Eris Thorne, his usual composure unwavering, studied the drawing with an intensity that unnerved Jensen. "He's escalating," Thorne stated, his voice devoid of emotion, yet laced with an undeniable gravity. "He's gaining confidence." The previous acts were about the ritual, the control. This sketch signifies a shift. He wants to be seen, to be understood, or perhaps, to mock the futility of our efforts. Thorne's profile of the weaver was taking shape, chillingly precise. Highly intelligent, meticulous, and likely a loner. He derives a profound sense of power and satisfaction from his acts. He's organized, planning his kills with surgical precision. No sexual component, no overt savagery. This isn't about primal urges. It's about control, artistry, and a twisted sense of justice or purpose. He views himself as an architect, perhaps, or a conductor of a macabre symphony. The victims are not random, not truly. There is an underlying connection, a hidden thread that only he perceives. Our failure to see it only validates his superior intellect in his own mind. Jensen, hunched over the expanding case board, felt a surge of frustrated anger. "But what is it, Doctor? We've pulled every record, every association. No shared workplaces, no common social circles, no financial links. They're strangers who just happen to live in the same city. Strangers, perhaps, in the conventional sense," Thorne conceded, his eyes scanning the map. "But not in his world. He sees something in them, a quality, a past event, a symbolic representation that makes them suitable threads for his loom." The investigation became a relentless, grinding marathon. Jensen and Ramirez worked 17-hour days, fueled by stale coffee and a desperate need for answers. They interviewed hundreds, chasing down every anonymous tip, every suspicious sighting. The media's scrutiny intensified, their reports growing more critical of the police's apparent inability to catch the killer. The chief of police aged visibly, his face a roadmap of stress. One evening, deep into the night, Jensen found herself staring at the magnified image of the knots again. There was something about them, beyond their intricate beauty, that tugged at the edge of her consciousness. "The thread," she murmured, more to herself than Ramirez, who was dozing fitfully on a desk nearby. "It's always the same, dark, almost black, but with a subtle sheen. What kind of thread is this?" Forensics had initially dismissed it as a common polyester or silk blend, impossible to trace. But Jensen's intuition, honed by years of seeing things others missed, urged her to revisit it. She called Dr. Reed at the ME's office, requesting a reevaluation, a deeper analysis of the fiber. Dr. Reed, though exhausted, agreed. Days later, the call came. "Sarah, you were right." Dr. Reed's voice was thin, almost excited. "It's not common. It's a very specific blend of fine silk and a rare, almost metallic synthetic fiber. And the dye. It's unique, not commercially mass-produced. It's custom-made or from a very niche supplier. I've never seen anything quite like it." This was it, the first tangible physical lead. Ramirez, invigorated by the news, immediately mobilized a team. The search for the source of this unique thread began. A painstaking investigation into textile manufacturers, craft suppliers, custom dyers, not just in Oak Haven but across the region. It was like searching for a single strand of hair in a haystack, but at least now they knew what they were looking for. Meanwhile, Dr. Thorne continued his psychological dissection of the weaver. He postulated that the killer would likely be someone unremarkable, blending seamlessly into the background, perhaps even someone seen as harmless or eccentric. He would be meticulous in his personal life, a perfectionist. And crucially, he might have a connection to something that unified the victims in a way not immediately obvious. Think about shared experiences, not shared acquaintances, Thorne advised. Did they all pass through the same place? Use the same service? Attend a singular, perhaps long-forgotten event? This led Jensen to a new approach. Instead of looking for what the victims did together, she started looking for what they experienced together. She pored over old city records, community event rosters, and even archived newspaper classifieds. It was a monumental task. The victims Eleanor Vance, Marcus Thorne, Maria Rodriguez, David Chun, their lives were so disparate. One night, as Oakhaven hunkered down, a near miss occurred that tightened the city's collective breath. A patrol car, cruising through a quiet residential area, noticed a dark sedan parked without its lights on, a solitary figure inside, observing a house. As the patrol car approached, the sedan's lights flashed on, and it sped away, disappearing into the labyrinthine suburban streets before the officers could react. The house being observed belonged to Emily Davison, a retired librarian who lived alone. The next morning, a patrol unit found a freshly tied knot, identical to the others, on her porch swing. A chilling message: "I was here, and I almost succeeded." The public outrage was immense. The mayor issued a tearful plea on national television. The FBI bolstered its presence. Jensen, feeling the weight of impending failure, pushed herself harder. She went back to the victims, not just their files, but their lives. What did they all have in their homes? What small, seemingly insignificant detail could unite them? She spent hours sifting through crime scene photos, zooming in on mundane objects. Eleanor's rose garden, Marcus's collection of vintage maps, Maria's small, carefully curated bookshelf, David's ancient globes. Then a flicker of an idea. It wasn't an object they owned. It was something more subtle. She noticed a specific type of houseplant in Eleanor's living room, a rare species of orchid. Later, she remembered seeing a similar, though less mature, orchid in Marcus's office, tucked away on a shelf. Maria, in one of her few personal photos found in her apartment, was smiling beside a small, potted orchid on her windowsill. And David Chun, the history professor, had a magnificent, sprawling orchid hanging in his study, clearly a prized possession. Orchids. It was such an odd, almost ethereal connection. Not everyone owned them, and these weren't common varieties. They were specific, delicate, requiring careful cultivation. Could this be it? Could the killer be targeting orchid enthusiasts? Or perhaps someone who provided them? Jensen shared her observation with Thorne, who nodded slowly, his eyes alight with a rare spark of interest. Intriguing detective. Orchids are often seen as symbols of beauty, luxury, or obsession, and they require a specialist touch, a unique supplier perhaps, or someone who interacts with them professionally. Concurrently, the lead on the unique thread began to bear fruit. After weeks of exhaustive searching, a small, independent craft store in a neighboring town, specializing in high-end textile arts and bespoke weaving supplies, reported a sudden, unusual purchase of the specific silk/synthetic blend in the exact dark shade described. The owner, a sweet, elderly woman with a remarkable memory for her customers, recalled the buyer, a quiet, unassuming man, always polite, who seemed to have an almost obsessive interest in the quality and texture of the threads. He paid cash always and never lingered. He said he was a hobbyist weaver. The description was vague, but it was something. Quiet, unassuming man. A hobbyist weaver. The pieces began to click into place. The unique thread, the orchid connection, the profile of a meticulous, organized killer. Jensen and Ramirez compiled a list of everyone who had purchased unique orchids from specialty nurseries in the Oakhaven area over the past few years, cross-referencing it with the craft store's sparse descriptions of their mysterious customer. The list was still too long, but it was manageable. They were looking for an overlap, an orchid enthusiast who also frequented a niche craft store. The loom tightened, The anonymous message, the carefully drawn web, the near miss at Emily Davison's house, these weren't random acts. They were the Weaver's increasingly bold assertions of his control. He knew the police were closing in, perhaps he even relished the chase. As Oakhaven braced for another terrifying night, the detectives knew they were on the verge of a breakthrough, but the killer, ever the artist, was surely preparing his grand finale. The chilling realization hung in the air. The hunt was far from over. It was about to become a desperate race against time. The scent of damp earth and impending rain hung heavy in the air of Oakhaven, mirroring the city's mood. Hope, a fragile seedling, had begun to sprout among the fear, watered by the tantalizing leads uncovered by detectives Jensen and Ramirez, guided by Dr. Thorne's chillingly accurate insights. The unique thread, traced to a specific craft store, and Jensen's intuitive leap about the orchids, had finally provided the elusive connection. They were no longer hunting a ghost. They were hunting a man, a meticulous artisan of death. The list of potential suspects, refined by the combined criteria of unique orchid purchases and visits to the specialized craft store, had narrowed to a frighteningly small number: 6 individuals. Each was unremarkable in their own way: a retired librarian, a quiet clockmaker, a software engineer, a ceramic artist, a night shift security guard, and a reclusive woodcarver named Elias Thorne. The irony of the shared surname with the FBI profiler was not lost on Jensen, adding a bizarre layer to the grim pursuit. Elias Thorne lived in a small, unassuming house on the eastern edge of Oakhaven, a property that was meticulously maintained, its garden a riot of carefully cultivated, exotic flora, including several rare orchids. He kept to himself, known in the neighborhood as the Quiet Carver, often seen walking his meticulously groomed border collie, or disappearing into his backyard studio, where he crafted intricate wooden sculptures that often depicted tangled roots and complex, intertwined patterns. "He fits the profile almost perfectly," Dr. Thorne stated, his gaze fixed on Elias's grainy surveillance photo. The meticulousness, the artistic inclination, the reclusiveness, the control over his environment. He's the type of individual who would feel overlooked, unappreciated, harboring a deep-seated resentment that manifests as a desire for ultimate control and recognition, even if that recognition is born of terror. Jensen and Ramirez established round-the-clock surveillance on Elias Thorne. Days blurred into nights, observing his routine. Solitary walks, trips to a local coffee shop where he sat alone, reading, his eyes often darting, observing others with an intensity that belied his calm exterior. He visited the craft store periodically, always paying cash, always buying the specific dark silken thread. He also had a standing order at a specialty orchid nursery across town, further cementing the connection. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. "We need more," Chief Miller insisted, his voice strained. "We can't move on circumstantial evidence alone. He's too smart, too careful. We need something concrete, something that ties him directly to a crime scene." The pressure was immense. The city was a powder keg, waiting for the slightest spark. Every hour that passed was a potential opportunity for the Midnight Weaver to strike again. Jensen felt the weight of it, the faces of Eleanor, Marcus, Maria, David, flashing in her mind's eye. She needed to get inside his head to predict his next move. "He's an artist," Jensen mused, staring at the sketch the weaver had left the tangled web. "Artists have a message. What is his?" Dr. Thorne, leaning back in his chair, steepled his fingers. "He perceives himself as weaving a new order, exposing the hidden vulnerabilities, the unnoticed connections. He's imposing his will on Oakhaven. His victims, disparate as they seemed, likely shared a symbolic quality in his eyes, perhaps representing something he felt wronged by, or something he wished to control or extinguish. The knots are his signature, yes, but also a metaphor for his control over life and death, the tying and untying of existence." Ramirez, ever practical, pointed to a new development. "We've analyzed his recent movements. He's been spending a lot of time near the old public library on Cedar Street. It's closed for renovations, empty at night. The old library, a place of knowledge, of stories, of order. Elias Thorne, the reclusive woodcarver, clicked for Jensen. He's planning something. The library is a stage, and he's looking for his next thread. The team focused their surveillance on the library. Inside Elias Thorne's home, covert listening devices and cameras had been installed, providing a chilling glimpse into his private world. They found meticulously organized journals, filled not with words, but with intricate sketches of knots, each more complex than the last, alongside disturbing musings on the patterns of existence and the weakness of the untangled. There were also detailed drawings of the victims' homes, almost architectural in their precision, indicating weeks, perhaps months, of planning and observation. He had been stalking his victims long before he ever made his move. But the final piece of the puzzle, the one that broke the case open, came from a seemingly innocuous detail in one of Elias's journals. Amidst the complex knot designs, there was a crude drawing of a specific, very rare species of orchid, a ghost orchid, known for its pale, almost translucent beauty. Beneath it, a single, chilling name, Sarah. Jensen felt a cold dread seize her. Sarah, her own first name. Was this a coincidence? Or was she, the lead detective on the case, his final, most audacious target? He had been watching her, observing her. The thought sent shivers down her spine, but also ignited a fierce resolve. He wasn't just targeting, he was challenging. Dr. Thorne, his face grim, confirmed her worst fears. It's a direct challenge, detective. You represent the unraveling of his masterpiece. He sees you as his final, most significant thread. He wants to bring the entire narrative to a climactic end. The race against time became a personal one. Jensen pushed aside her fear, focusing on the mission. They couldn't wait for him to make a move on her. They had to intercept him. That night, Elias Thorne left his house, his movements precise and deliberate. He carried a small, leather satchel. He drove towards the old Cedar Street Library, the city's heart now holding its breath. Jensen, Ramirez, and a fully armed SWAT team were already in position, hidden in the shadows around the dilapidated building. The air was tense, thick with adrenaline. Inside the library, the creaks and groans of the old building amplified the silence. Elias, oblivious to the trap, moved with a phantom's grace, his flashlight beam cutting through the dust motes, dancing in the moonlight, filtering through tall, arched windows. He had chosen the central reading room, a grand space with high ceilings and empty shelves, as his stage. As he reached the center of the room, he produced a small, silver object from his satchel, a pair of specialized knitting needles, impossibly fine and sharp. He pulled out a spool of the familiar dark thread, his hands moving with the practiced ease of a master craftsman. He began to tie a knot, the most intricate one yet, a macabre masterpiece he intended to leave as his final statement. Elias Thorne, police, drop the weapon. Jensen's voice cut through the silence like a knife. Elias froze, his head snapping up. His eyes, devoid of surprise, met hers across the vast, shadowed room. There was no fear in his gaze, only a chilling sense of triumph, as if he had anticipated this confrontation, relishing the dramatic climax. The knitting needles, delicate as they were, looked menacing in his hand, a testament to the quiet precision of his horror. "Detective Jensen," he said, his voice a low, calm murmur that echoed through the empty hall. "You found me." A true artist always expects his work to be eventually appreciated, even by his critics. He made a sudden, fluid movement, not towards Jensen, but towards a support pillar behind him, where he had clearly intended to attach his final grand knot. "Don't move," Ramirez yelled, his weapon raised. But Elias ignored them, his focus entirely on his final act. He moved with a speed that belied his quiet demeanor, securing the thread to the pillar, his fingers working with furious, almost manic energy. He was completing his masterpiece, his final statement of control. Jensen knew she couldn't let him finish. This wasn't just about the physical act. It was about the psychological victory he sought. "Taser him," she shouted. A crackle of electricity, and Elias Thorne convulsed, dropping the needles and the thread. He fell to the ground, his body spasming, but even as he lay there, his eyes still fixed on Jensen, a faint, twisted smile played on his lips. His masterpiece, his narrative of terror, was complete, at least in his mind. He had woven his final thread. The aftermath was a blur of police sirens, flashing lights, and the heavy weight of relief. Elias Thorne was taken into custody, his home and studio meticulously searched, revealing a chilling trove of evidence. Journals detailing his twisted philosophy, more detailed sketches of his victims, and an entire room dedicated to his weaving spools of the unique thread, various tools, and even a collection of dried, pressed ghost orchids. His motive, slowly pieced together, was a delusion of grandiosity, a belief that he was correcting the imbalance of society, revealing the hidden fragility beneath the veneer of order. He saw himself as a meticulous gardener, pruning the undesirable, creating a perfect, if terrifying, tapestry of fear. Oakhaven breathed a collective sigh of relief, but it was a ragged, wounded breath. The Midnight Weaver was caught, but the scars he left ran deep. The city would never quite shake the chilling memory of those weeks of terror, the days when silence became synonymous with dread. Jensen and Ramirez, hailed as heroes, found themselves grappling with the profound psychological toll. The quiet streets, the locked doors, the wary glances, these were the lasting legacies of Elias Thorne. They had caught the monster, but the fear he had planted would linger, a persistent shadow on Oakhaven's once bright landscape. Dr. Thorne, before departing, offered a final, sobering assessment to Jensen. "We hunt monsters, detective, but sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that blend in, the ones who seem ordinary. They are the ones who show us the true fragility of our peace." Jensen stood in her office, the once cluttered case board now empty, save for a single, small photograph of Elias Thorne's face. The nightmare was over. The threads were cut. But the memory of the Midnight Weaver's terrifying art would forever be woven into the fabric of Oakhaven. A chilling reminder that even in the most peaceful of places, darkness can take root, waiting patiently to bloom. The final knot was tied, but its memory would forever unravel the quiet comfort of their lives.